Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be talking about One Piece chapter 939, and I really like this chapter. I thought it was good. It had a lot of great parts to it and a lot of not reveals, but just kind of some nice little tidbits here and there, and I'm excited to talk about it, really. So I have a lot to talk about, really, because this chapter was overall just very jam-packed with a bunch of stuff. It was a lot like the last number of chapters where they kind of like show you a little bit of each scene, each person, what they're doing, or at least like a few people here and there instead of focusing on one particular person. So they started off with Zoro and Hiyori and Toko, or Otoko, and it's just more talking. They're talking about how Momo and Kinemon and Kandoro, they all went to the future, and oh, it's gonna be weird because Hiyori is 26 now, even though she's actually the younger sister, and Momo's still technically 8. So it's gonna be a weird thing, and also Hiyori is way more goofy and kind of charismatic, I guess, in a sense. Like, she's way more goofy and kind of more what's the word I'm looking for? Just kind of like joyful, I guess, especially with Toko and like the two of them interacting with each other than she ever was when we first met her as Komurasaki. And obviously that was just a facade, and she had to kind of do whatever she's got to do with that. But she's really more childish than originally thought. In any event, so we learn a little bit about how she actually got away from all of the craziness that was going on 20 years prior. So the castle was burning, Momo and his crew got sent to the future, and Odin and his wife died. And we learned two things. So one, Hiyori, the reason why Hiyori didn't go to the future with Momo and all the other people was because just in case something happened to them, they needed the like bloodline to live on. So it was one or the other, and ultimately it was chosen for her to stay behind, which is really kind of messed up because it's like, in either case, whether Momo stayed behind or her, they're still children, so they have to deal with that. So one gets sent to the future, or if something bad happens, just dies, and the other, well, has to live with the situation at hand, and that's pretty messed up. The next thing that we learn is that it was actually Kawamatsu that saved her, and it turns out that he is in fact a Kappa. They just straight out say it, he is a Kappa, and that's part of the reason why he laughs like Kappa Papa. And it turns out, like, so he saves her, and for a certain amount of time they were living together, and he was teaching her and taking care of her. Eventually they split, and at some point in time he got arrested and thrown in jail, and she became Komurasaki and started hanging out with Kyoshiro. But the interesting thing that I have to think about, though, is this. If he's actually a Kappa, that probably means that he's a fishman, right? So not only did the Kozukis have the Minks on their team, they also potentially had at least one fishman. And I assume he's not a Mink because it's just, Minks seem to be more, I guess, land dwellers? At the very least, maybe more like, they seem to be more furry animal based than anything else. So if he's a Kappa, then that probably means he's a fishman. Either way, we still didn't get any shot of him, and he's still in jail. And at one point, we cut back to Luffy doing his fighting, and he's just like, there, I wish I was out there fighting with them. And he's still got, apparently he's got a hat on him. So that's a thing. That's kind of the only thing we really learned about his appearance, other than the fact he is a Kappa. So maybe in the next chapter, we'll actually see him. We then jump to the capital, where all of Orochi's men are rounding up people that have any connection with the Kozuki clan, with the symbol, with the little flyer that's been handing out. So anybody that has any connection with that is being thrown in jail. And you have some people that are kind of like, I don't believe them, but they're saying, oh, hey, man, 20 years ago, this was a fashion statement. You can't just throw us in jail for nothing. For that, that's not proof, but I get the feeling that they're just kind of like trying to save their tails in that sense. But either way, they're all being thrown in jail, and it's just a huge roundup of all these people, and their plan is basically being just flushed down the toilet, and it's really no good. I think this is kind of in Oda's way of kind of making it be like, okay, well, They're not going to go to Onigashima with a giant army anymore. It's going to be the core characters, and that's it. And they're just going to go in sneaky-like rather than just an invasion. With all these people being rounded up, we actually see where Beppo is and the other members of Law's crew, and Beppo looks pretty messed up. He's messed up. They're like, Captain's gonna save us. Well, we just gotta hold on, and that's really all we see about them. But I have a feeling Law is gonna be pretty pissed when he sees Beppo. After that, we move on to this like second half of the chapter, which is entirely Luffy and Old Man Hyo fighting in their sumo matches, and sumo matches, and it's just basically Luffy doing what Luffy does. They're fighting the alpaca guy, and then they're also fighting this new guy, an armadillo man who is named Madillo Man, and they're just kind of going at it, and Queen doesn't seem worried at all for Luffy because it's just like, I mean, one, why would he be worried about Luffy? But also because he seems to have some confidence in Luffy's strength, and honestly, I think he's being entertained. I think this is all just to entertain him, and ultimately he doesn't care how it goes down. Luffy could keep fighting and eventually maybe break out, but he's still going to be entertained by the fighting. Now, as they're fighting, it becomes very obvious that Luffy is using observation haki, but the ascended version of observation haki, where he can see in the future, and this is something he learned from the Katakuri fight in the last arc, and he seemed to gotten pretty good at it. He may not have mastered it, but he can do it without closing his eyes, and he's kind of just doing it flagrantly and just doing it whatever. He's giving Old Man Hyo instructions on what to do and how to avoid the alpaca guy's attacks, and the Old Man Hyo's just like really kind of taken aback by this because it's just like, how are you doing this? So Luffy is seeing into the future and using that future sight, and I don't think he's entirely mastered it, but it's cool to see him training and using it, and say in a lot of ways this is him training. It literally is him training. He says he's training, but like this is him growing as a character, as a fighter, and he's basically using on-screen time to do so rather than it being another time skip or him doing it off-screen, like how he learned hockey in the beginning. So I really like that. And one thing to point out is that, like, yes, he's using this ascended version of observation hockey, and using it pretty well, honestly, despite learning it relatively recently, but he's also in a much less stressful situation than he was when he was fighting Katakuri. Even without it, I don't think he'd have too much trouble with this armadillo guy and alpaca guy, let alone anybody else that's going to come up eventually to fight him, other than maybe Queen. But he's definitely in a low stress situation. He's having a good time. He's training. He's not worried. So in those kind of situations, when you learn a skill, even if you're new at it, it seems like in low stress situations you can do it pretty well. But then once, like, you really need to do it and it's, like, life or death situation, that's where you're going to choke. So it's really good to see him using it now while he can learn how to use it, the ins and outs and whatever, of this, like, future sight without having to worry about it too much. And I know a lot of people are going to be angry at him just being able to do it willy-nilly, but, like, really, it's, like, small potatoes. I think this will give him a leg up and maybe be able to give him some really well-deserved fighting abilities that maybe will help him not struggle so much against some of these even lower-end people that are in the Yonko's crews. I mean, if he could beat Biscuit and Katakuri, he's got to grow in some capacity. Let him grow on screen, basically. So during this entire fight, it's been no secret that Luffy's been using this to literally train, and he's not even training to use the observation haki. He is trying to figure out how to do what Rayleigh once did, and I forget what the other example that they used, but it's basically this, like, force ability. In my head, I'm thinking force ability, but it's basically like a haki that allows you to strike an opponent without actually physically touching them, and he's trying his hardest. He knows that it kind of looks like armament hockey, but he's not exactly sure how to do it. And he basically says that, like, once he does it, he'll know how to do it. He'll know how to, like, practice more. But until he does that, he's just trying whatever he can. But he keeps just arming himself normally and he doesn't know what to do. And it turns out that Old Man Hyo's got some skill going on here. So Haki is not known as Haki in Wano. It's known by another name. I don't think that they gave the name of it, but it's a mystical ability that at least really tough people have learned. And Old Man Hyo's like, well, you described basically an ability that we have here in Wano, and he has Luffy use the future sight to kind of give him some directions on how to get close to the alpaca guy, and then he uses the ability, and Luffy's like, that's it, you gotta teach me. And Old Man Hyo's like, alright, let's do it. So it's abundantly clear that this is like another, it's honestly really cool to see. So like Observation Haki has the future sight, and that's kind of the ascended version of that. And this like no touching attack thingamajigger is kind of the ascended version of Armament Haki. So I'm wondering if like maybe Conqueror's Haki has like an ascended version of that. Either way, it's really cool to see how Haki has like kind of layers to it, rather than it just being, oh, regular Observation Haki, Armament Haki, and then obviously not a lot of people have Conqueror's Haki, but it's cool to see that these versions of Haki have some extra steps that you can get better at using them. And also, damn, Old Man Hyo is really cool, even though he's old and like kind of this like little guy, he's really like still on top of his game, as like, at least once he's eaten something. Obviously, once you're, like, food deprived, you're not going to be too great, even if you're in good shape. He was not in great shape to begin with, because he's an old man. But he's put in some work. Now he can teach this, like, new Haki thingamajigger to Luffy, and it's going to be really interesting to see them work together to fight really anybody that comes forward, and see how Luffy learns to use this new version of Haki. And also, something to bring up, this version of Haki, this like no touching whatever, like Old Man Hyo explains it the exact same way that Zoro's teacher back when he was a kid explained like swordsmanship to him, the ability to cut steel right through, but at the same time not cut paper, and be able to just like do what you need to do, and your sword or you or whatever you'll have some kind of control over that. And so he explains it's basically the same as Zoro's teacher. So that brings up a couple of questions here. One, is Zoro from Wano maybe? Unless that was a remote island. I don't remember whether they ever said specifically where Zoro learned swordsmanship. Or at the very least was his teacher from Wano, and that's where he learned it. And we basically been seeing this version of Haki at least referenced throughout the series, and they even kind of reference it, and Zoro uses it essentially, at least that methodology in Alabasta against Mr. One, I think his name is Mr. One, the guy with the sword blade hand thingamajiggers. Either way, this is a very interesting concept, and I'm excited to see Luffy learn it and continue training. I like seeing him train on screen and grow as a fighter. I'm interested to see more of Old Man Hyo, and I'm just overall really jazzed about this chapter. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Yeah, that's really all I gotta say. I don't want to drag this out too much longer. Let me know what you guys thought about the chapter down below in the comments section, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, if you want to see more from me, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. That way you'll get all kinds of notifications. I will see you guys in another video, and I hope you have an awesome day. I like this chapter a lot. Bye-bye.